if there's one genre that people have grown to love and appreciate over time, it's the giant monster films. The only movies that really worked back in the day were the Godzilla and King Kong films, and that too mostly in Japan and other Asian countries. Luckily, we're spoiled for choice in today's world, and I want to shout out some of the gems with my top 25 giant monster scenes of all time.
This time, the bait needs to dangle longer. I must strike the weak spot from behind.
And how do you know they have a weak spot?
I don't, but they must, right? Let's go!
While this movie may not score a lot of points in the Oscars categories, it had some fun scenes and pretty impressive monsters, like the snake dragons we see here. The fact that they're pets of two evil goddesses only makes the whole thing much more interesting, but the battle between them and the duo of Beck and Horus was as good as it got in 2016's Gods of Egypt. Sometimes I wonder why Nikolaj Coster decided to lead such a movie when he was fresh off the Game of Thrones fame, but hey, I'd rather just focus on the chase scene here, okay? It's pretty standard stuff as it comes to a couple of heroes trying to run away from a giant monster only to trick it and lead it to its death. However, I really love the design of the snake dragon, and yes, I'm calling it a dragon because it can freaking breathe fire. The overall execution of the scene is pretty cool, and I also like the bit when the second snake shows up only to burn itself and its mistress to ashes when Horus's ex, Hathor, shows up to save the day. I wonder if they broke up because she caught him with his own sister. I also can't believe they really got rid of the first snake the same way SpongeBob and Sandy got rid of the Alaskan bullworm.
Neither can you.
Wow, I really don't know how to go about this scene because it's totally awesome. Well, it also involved the outright murder of Rhaenyra's son and his loyal dragon, but that's a fair price to pay for a brilliantly shot and executed sequence. I agree that it's a bit too dark at times for the visuals to be prominent, but that's the whole idea of striking fear into our hearts as the massive Varga hunts down Lucerys and Arrax. As sad as it may be, this was executed perfectly. No off-screen business, the victims were literally chomped to pieces by something so much bigger. I know a vast majority of the scene is CGI, but when you're able to present it in such a thrilling sequence backed by an amazing color grading strategy, then I'm not going to complain about anything at all. Seeing the whole thing unfold in full detail really makes me appreciate the scale of danger here. Also, the shot of Varga flying above Arrax and Lucerys is one of the most frightening images I've ever seen. That and the shot of Varga's shadow waiting outside of the Baratheon castle perfectly highlighted how much of a threat this giant dragon is. I swear, bro's so huge, he could easily be the Godzilla version of the dragons. I'm surprised that the volcanic monster Kronos isn't mentioned as one of the greatest CGI monsters of all time. Just look at the work that's gone into building his creature design, especially when Zeus, Hades and Perseus unite to take him down. Not only are his movements realistic, but also the lava attack makes so much sense. After all, the substance is supposed to become hard when it has enough contact with air, and that's exactly what we see when Perseus does his best to avoid the attack. I mean, it's been 11 years since this movie came out, and I'm yet to see the kind of CGI we got to witness over here. Even the way Zeus used his lightning powers in this scene is pretty well done and makes the battle seem all the more appealing. Also, how often is it that you get to see polar opposites like Zeus and Hades working together to defeat a common enemy? It was the perfect final battle and made for a much better ending than the one we saw in the first film with the Kraken monster, even though that guy was a lot more intimidating as a monster. Kudos for Perseus for looking like a total badass, nailing that finisher move while riding what I like to call a demon horse. Okay, I did just say the previous entry was a much better ending as compared to this one, but that's only because we get to see the Kraken for a total of maybe 2 minutes. Even then, I'd happily pay full price for a movie ticket to be able to experience this in cinemas again. Holy mother of God, the creature design on this dude is phenomenal, and I wonder if they weren't able to show more of him because his visuals were taking too much of the budget. Either way, seeing the Kraken present himself in all his glory wasn't just a scary moment for the people in the film, but for the audience members as well. Hearing that roar for the first time was an exceptional experience that I'm grateful to have witnessed in my life. The best part about about this scene is that nothing is really happening here, but the beast is just so damn amazing that you can't help but keep your eyes on the screen. It's a huge shame that something as simple as Medusa's head was enough to defeat the Kraken, but then again, I don't think Perseus would have been able to take him down in any other way. Now imagine if the Kraken and Kronos were to get into a fight. That would have instantly taken the top spot in this video.
The king is risen.
The sequel may not be making any waves at the box office, but the first Aquaman movie remains the DCEU's most successful film to date, and a certain chunk of that credit has to go to the final battle where Arthur Curry manages to command the Carathan beast. Yeah, I know Carathan is just another way of saying Kraken, but that's just how show business works, okay? Now the DC universe hasn't been known for its visual effects, but this creature's design is definitely on point, and I was only rooting for Aquaman to prove his merit as king so that he could ride that monster into battle and dominate everyone in sight. The Carathan's roar is pretty badass, and the way he was taking down enemy ships like their little toys was a nice way to establish its impact. They were literally throwing everything they had at the beast, and all it did was provoke him even further. I know we all like to make fun of Aquaman for being this weird superhero who can only talk to fish, but if the fish in question is a demonic monster like this one, then I'd love to have that kind of skill as well. Okay, so I just want to clear something up, okay? These scenes will always have some kind of human involvement, which is why you won't see something like Nuclear Godzilla on this list. That way, it'll be pretty simple to predict the top spot. What I can include, though, is the scene where both Godzilla and King Ghidorah battle it out in the sea, only for the humans to nuke them in the middle of the fight. Man, I wish they hadn't done that, because the King of the Monsters was dominating the battle till that point. Bro managed to stand his ground despite the size difference, and he even took out one of Ghidorah's dragon heads, so it's not like he needed any backup. Anyway, the scene lived up to the hype this film had created, and the battle was truly of epic proportions. Of course, a lot of it had to do with the fact that the monsters looked extremely realistic because, let's be honest here, nobody's watching a Godzilla movie for the plot, right? We just want to see monsters fighting each other, you know, like Dr. Ishiro from the first film. That dude spoke for everyone when he said, "Let them fight," and rightfully so.
Both your fathers would be ashamed!
It's kind of weird that I've chosen a scene from the Hellboy movie that actually sucks, but to be honest, the monster invasion sequence deserves to be on this list. The scene was truly terrifying and amazing at the same time. It represents real hell and what the demons and monsters of hell would do if they ever got unleashed upon Earth. A lot of the conversations around this scene was that it was pretty gory, but that's the reality of such a situation. I don't get why some people had issues with this scene, you know, because it's kind of an accurate representation of hell on Earth. I guess fairy tale movies suit them better, but each to their own, right? I swear though, each and every one of these monsters need to have their own spin-off movies. That's the kind of concept that would actually work in Hollywood right now, especially with superhero fatigue fast setting in.
What is this? Illusion.
No, this is real.
Listen, I don't care what anyone says, Dormammu is a giant monster and nobody can change my mind about that, okay? Just look at his creature design and tell me if you want to call that dude anything but a savage beast. Luckily, Doctor Strange came in to save the day on a rather hilarious note. The bargaining scene has gone on to find its way into the meme hall of fame, but the actual fighting that happens between him and Dormammu is also pretty neat. Sure, Steven loses every single time, but the fact that he comes right back with the exact same line is top class stuff. Of course, he deserves all the praise in the world for having to experience painful death so many times, but I guess that's the price to pay if you're the supreme sorcerer. I obviously rewatched this scene before putting it on the list, and I can tell you for sure that Dormammu's powers know no bounds. Honestly though, I wonder how Benedict Cumberbatch would have dealt with Dormammu if he was Sherlock Holmes. Maybe he would have just keep roasting him with his witty jokes till the monster decides to give up on consuming Earth.
Set me free!
No, I've come to bargain.
What do you want?
Jeff Jeff Goldblum really can't catch a break, can he? I mean, if running away from the T-Rex dinosaurs in Jurassic Park wasn't enough, here he is trying to escape from the Harvester Queen in Independence Day Resurgence. It's a shame the filmmakers couldn't help but make so many bad decisions in this film. There are bits and pieces of awesome in it, particularly the creature designs. The visuals of the Harvester Queen were great, especially when she's in motion, so it's a shame they couldn't maintain the same momentum throughout the rest of the film. Of course, this particular scene is pretty thrilling, with the Harvester Queen going after a bus full of civilians while also taking down fighter jets at the same time. Yep, I know there are objections to the fact that she couldn't catch a school bus despite being able to smack down fighter jets with ease, but I'm not here to justify the scripts, okay? Also, I want to shout out the girl who saves the cute doggo in the middle of the alien invasion. If that good boy was eaten by the Queen, then I'd probably have turned into John Wick. Graphically, this whole movie was an experience and a lesson on how poor script writing can ruin that beauty.
Okay, we're going with giant robots again. All right, real original, guys. Not impressed.
The success of the first Pacific Rim film had made this sequel possible, but unfortunately, just like Independence Day Resurgence, the second installment totally ruined the reputation of its predecessor. Luckily for you, the TV region only focuses on scenes that make an impact, and the Mega Kaiju final battle easily qualifies for that. Honestly, the Jaeger pilot should have just attacked the Kaijus when they were merging with each other, but I'm glad they didn't do that, because we've got to see the most impressive monster from both the movies put together. The Beast was a force to be reckoned with, and it could be seen in the way he took down all those Jaeger robots with absolute ease. In a way, I was happy to see those brats being taught a lesson because they had some serious attitude problems. Who entrusted you with suits that are literally worth hundreds of billions of dollars? Anyway, it was great to see a proper battle in this sequel because for some reason, the action choreography in the rest of the film felt very mid to me. I guess I should have prepared for this, especially after hearing that Guillermo del Toro was not going to direct the sequel. Imagine working hard your entire life, studying and preparing to have some big career and amazing life, and then to all of a sudden be sucked up and killed by some giant cloud. Yeah, that's exactly what happens when Parallax decides to lose control and attack the city. That kind of horrible luck is kind of symbolic of what happened with Ryan Reynolds when he chose this role as well. You could even call this scene an ironic case of meta humor. For all the wrongs this movie's committed, the one thing they did right was casting Clancy Brown as Parallax because that man is the best voice for such a role. Bro also voiced Surtur from Thor Ragnarok and Damien Darkblood from Invincible, so he's definitely got the knack for such a role. But yeah, if we're to consider this scene, then it's a pretty terrifying concept that's being presented to us. Parallax does look scary enough to be feared, and his actions are by no means forgivable because we get actual casualties from his attack. I'm still interested in seeing him presented in a different manner, but James Gunn is the only one who knows if this character's in the pipeline.
Oh, shit.
If you ever find yourself on an island inhabited by giant monsters, make sure your first plan of action is to befriend the massive gorilla who likes blonde women. This logic applies to both King Kong movies, but for this entry, we're going to consider the final battle of Skull Island. The Skull Crawlers are a handful anyway, but their boss monster is a whole other ballgame. Luckily, Kong was there to help out the humans, and they had Brie Larson to thank for that. Yeah, anyway, the scene isn't just limited to the awesome fight between Kong and the Skull Crawler. We also get to see the humans doing whatever they can to give their ape friend an advantage. Yeah, I know it's Kong who ends up killing the beast, but come on, that onslaught of bullets and the flare gun attack have got to count for something, right? To be honest, if this scene were to be compared to a school marathon, then the human gang would probably just get a certificate for participation. On a serious note though, it was nice to see Kong struggling in a battle, because you can't have your favourite monsters just win everything without any difficulties. It just gets boring after a certain point. This scene makes it here purely because of the stunning cinematography on display. Denis Villeneuve is one of the best modern directors working in the industry, with respected hits like Prisoners and Arrival, so when I heard that he was going to direct a retelling of Dune, I was hyped. I mean, another one of my favourite directors, David Lynch, tried his hand at it, but studio interference doomed the project right from the start. Denis, however, managed to pull off a respectable adaptation of the book, and he also gave us an amazing scene with the sandworm. The monster is only shown for a few seconds, that too not in its complete form, but the anticipation is what sells the scene. The sense of urgency shown in Paul and Gurney's escape perfectly showcases how much of a menace these monsters are, and if they didn't make it to the Thopter in time, then they probably wouldn't be expecting Dune Part 2 in 2024. The entire sequence felt so grand and larger than life that I was thanking my stars for choosing to have this experience in IMAX. Well, I really wanted to include Godzilla if the entry is from his movie, but whenever he shows up, he's just fighting the Muto, so there isn't anything with humans. Mutos, though, are all over the place as they go about wreaking havoc wherever they go. Now, the male is more of a menace who just likes to overcompensate for his lack of, height? I guess size does matter regardless of the species, eh? The reason why this scene lands so high up on the list is because the Muto is shown in a rather dangerous tone, especially with the dark color palette highlighting the entire sequence. If you look at Lieutenant Ford, he's pissing his pants because it's his first time seeing such a creature. This is the male we're talking about here, and since his birth is the first time that we see what Muto looks like, it's all the more impactful. The build up to him bursting out of the cocoon was nicely done, and the lack of clear vision in certain parts of the scene actually enhances the horror elements on display. It's not every day that you get to experience a monster invasion in your city, and that too by a ridiculously oversized monster. I've said it before, but I want to highlight why Clover is such an effective character in context to the film. We all know that monsters are about big reveals and amazing visuals, but the fact that this scene is presented in the form of found footage only makes it all the more fascinating. It's seen from the perspective of the innocent civilians who are trying to keep themselves alive in the middle of what is most definitely the worst experience of their lives. The monster is barely shown across the runtime of the film. When he does show up, he makes sure to leave its mark. The scene is also effective because of how it misleads us into thinking that Clover has been dealt with. That last reveal may not have intended to scare us per se, but it did demolish whatever hope the audience had for a happy ending. See, this is why low-budget movies are so effective. I opened up with an entry from Gods of Egypt, and I'm doing the same for the top 10 section. The credit for this will have to go once again to the creature design of the giant worm that Ra takes down with his light blasts. Dune may have been the better film, but Gods of Egypt has the scarier worm. The scene in question isn't too long, but it does more than enough in its limited duration. We get to see the demon worm in action, and then we see Ra showing off his powers almost as if he's trying to tame a rogue dog. Okay, I know I keep referring to the monster as a demon worm, but that's a much better name than Apophis. The fact that Ra has to fight him all the time to keep the civilians safe must be pretty hectic, but he does have the advantage of being the god of the sun and light. here's a Pacific Rim movie that I can get behind. I'd have loved to cover the fight between Gypsy Danger and Otachi, but I want to give the kaiju some of the spotlight, so she gets to enjoy a solo feature here in the scene where she invades Hong Kong and wreaks havoc over there. Keep in mind that this is the same monster who's just taken down a couple of high-profile Jaegers, so she's definitely not one to mess around with. See, this is why you need someone like Guillermo del Toro to provide his expertise, because Otachi wasn't even a Category 5 kaiju. She was able to cause so much damage because she had a certain kind of fighting intelligence. It was this exact reason why she was also able to give Gypsy Danger a run for its money. I can only imagine what kind of beast that kid of hers would have grown into had it not suffocated after its mom was sliced in half. If you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, then you should definitely search for the Tulu shown in 2020's Underwater. The film in itself is okay, but if you don't have the time for a feature-length offering, then you should at least check out this beast's magnificent design. The look on Nora's face is priceless, especially when she realizes that all the monsters she was fighting until now are just smaller fractions of a much larger being. I mean, just imagine a creature that transcends humanity to the point where we can't even understand it, looking down at you in the deep ocean. I get chills just thinking about it, you know? Basically, this scene in particular has reinforced the reason why I never like to go underwater, which isn't a pun just because the film has the same name.
You want Asgard? It's yours.
Whatever game you're playing, it won't work.
No, I know. But he got me.
I'd mentioned in the Hellboy entry that Clancy Brown did a good job of voicing Surtur, so I figured I might as well give you the scene where he finally gets his redemption. Getting humiliated by Thor in the opening sequence of the film must have been a horrible experience for the dude, but he is Hell's very own monster, so it was only a matter of time before he was needed to counter Hela's evil plan. Bro even flicked the Hulk away as if he was a tiny little insect. Well, that might be a controversial statement, but I only care about badass scenes with giant monsters here, and Surtur fulfills that requirement by blasting Asgard and Hela to bits. I wonder what the God of Thunder would have done if he was up against this version of Surtur. Mistakes, then there are unforgivable mistakes, and then there's the Jurassic World Task Force going after the Indominus Rex with non-lethal weapons. I don't get it. You spent $60 million on a dinosaur that can kill any living being on the planet. Why on earth would you do such a thing in the first place? Couldn't you have just made some herbivore hybrid? Anyway, the scene between the Task Force and the Indominus is a total classic. I'm not just saying that because the dinosaur takes everyone down within 5 business minutes. She actually manipulates the squad with her camouflage trick and literally leads them straight into her claws. I was so impressed by this trap that I completely forgot innocent lives were being taken in the middle of my admiration. What a clever girl. I say, Muldoon would have been proud to see how far technology has come along. Godzilla does make it to my top 5, but not in the way that you'd imagine. It's 2016's Shin Godzilla, which means that this guy isn't our friend in arms. As a matter of fact, bro unleashes all kinds of beams from his mouth to destroy the city in front of him, and he spares no mercy for anyone. The beauty of this scene is that it uses a minimal budget to create such a deadly movement, and it even utilizes the sound effects from the older Godzilla movies rather than using its own versions. The formation of Shin Godzilla's atomic breath is pretty savage, as we can see his scales glowing up, followed by a fire blast, then the actual atomic breath, and then a laser beam that rips apart everything in its way. Man, I wonder how the American Godzilla would fare against this kind of attack. It definitely looks like he's got more variety, but alas, this will only remain a dream for yours truly. come on, the Balrog easily qualifies as a giant monster, so I was going to include the most popular scene from the first of the Lord of the Rings film trilogy. We all know what happens in this sequence, and even though Balrog is supposed to be the tougher opponent, it's Gandalf who manages to best him with a couple of powerful lines and an epic cane tap. Everyone keeps talking about the "you shall not pass" line.
You cannot pass! Gandalf!
But I also want to shed some light on another line where he says, "Go back to the shadow."
Go back to the shadow.
Because it's just as badass. Of course, the one with the finishing touch is the one that became immortalized in film history. But when it comes to moments like these, you can never reduce them to just a quote. I'll always have my reservations around the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones because they severely messed up what could have been one of the most legendary shows to have ever existed, right along the lines of The Sopranos or Breaking Bad. While we might not have gotten the ending we deserved, there was still an epic moment in the penultimate episode of the series, and that was Drogon's unrelenting attack on the Golden Company in the Iron Fleet. Daenerys has flipped over to the dark side and a dragon child ain't gonna listen to anyone else, so what follows is absolute destruction that's truly terrifying. I know that Khaleesi's behaviour here is a little bit questionable, but they also killed Rhaegal, so some of that rage was justified. I've covered quite a few Kraken monsters in this list, but the most popular one of them all has got to be the version we see in Pirates of Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Not only is the attack on the ship an amazingly shot sequence, but there's also one other aspect that stands out so much that it needs a separate mention. The Kraken's theme is one of the best orchestrated pieces in the entire film. It has the intonation of absolute terror and fear, the swelling of a sound reminiscent of a creature approaching the surface from the depths. Also, the organ is just mwah. That iconic theme stuck with people well after they'd seen the film. I was so disappointed the Kraken didn't make a return for At World's End, but that's just how life goes.
This is not your kingdom. These are dwarf lands. And we will have our revenge.
We just had the Drogon entry not too long ago, so I guess Thorin should have been paying attention before he tried drowning an overpowered dragon in liquid gold. Unfortunately, that plan went down the drain, and then Smaug decided to show what revenge actually looks like to the citizens of Lake Town. Listen, it goes without saying that Smaug is the best thing to have come out of the Hobbit trilogy, and his iconic line, "I am fire, I am death," is the most memorable quote from the series as well. Benedict Cumberbatch's voice acting is on point, especially with his delivery of this iconic line, but I also want to say that the trap wasn't as bad as it ended up looking. I love how entranced the gold made Smaug, almost as if it was hypnotizing him. They targeted his single weakness and it worked to a certain degree, but then the dragon reigns supreme, so he takes my top spot today. Hope you liked the video, please subscribe to the TV Region, and here's another video that I know you're going to enjoy.